Hi, my name is Jennifer Luarca, and this workshop is going to focus on strategies for online learning. The topics to cover today are going to be focused on participation and communication during an online lecture, creative study strategies for the virtual space, and also some online exam strategies. First and foremost, I want to talk about making sure that you're clarifying concepts as soon as possible when you're in lecture. Unlike the physical classroom where we have a chance to follow up with peers on our way out of class or maybe just hang behind and talk to the professor, we don't have those opportunities in the virtual classroom. So it's very, very important that you ask questions whenever something isn't clear to you. Now, your professor should make it clear what and how they want you to participate in class. They may ask you to use the chat function. They may ask you to speak up at the end of class. Whatever format they've set forth for the course, you want to follow that and respect their wishes, but you want to engage in that way as much as possible. So we don't want a lot of time going by without asking for clarification or help on a concept that we don't understand. You can definitely do this in class, but you can also do this when you visit virtual office hours. It's a great time to follow up and get clarification and maybe some extra examples about a concept you're not quite sure about. Also, you can email your instructor if you have questions, and there's a template here on the screen. You want to be very specific with your question, but also which class and which number and section you're coming from. Many of our professors are teaching multiple classes, maybe the same class multiple times a day, or different days of the week. So being very specific so they can look you up and kind of have an idea of where you're coming from helps them in terms of being able to respond and help you as much as possible. When you're communicating in class, you want to keep it succinct, so short and sweet. Fewer words the better. So you always want to set yourself up to lead with the main idea or the question, the theme that you're wanting to get more information on. But then kind of zone in on the specific piece that you're unclear about. Also, I want to point out that if somebody maybe hears the topic you're asking and starts talking about it and it's not what you're asking, it's okay to say, oh, no, excuse me, that's not what I mean. I mean, this is what I have a question about. It's okay to politely interrupt and redirect the speaker. If you don't, you run the risk of losing time in office hours, of them kind of going off on a different trajectory that isn't helpful to you. So it's okay to politely interrupt and say, oh, no, that's not what I was talking about. I mean, I have a question about this part of the concept. Okay. Another way you can go about asking questions is providing several short statements about the concept you're struggling with. This helps lead the listener into the area that you need more help with. So, for example, here on the screen, I'm wondering about the use of the formula for whatever it might be. So we've introduced the topic there. The speaker or the listener knows what you're going to talk about. Then you ask your question. When do I apply step 3? And can you show me an example of that, please? So now you're getting the answer that you need. You're directing the listener as much as you possibly can. And this helps to keep the interactions short, engaging, and productive. Now, when we're talking about online lectures, it is so important that you prepare beforehand. So I recommend that students arrive to their lecture or their learning space, log on to the computer about 5 to 10 minutes before class starts, when possible. This gives you time to log in, pull up necessary PowerPoints, have out the printed materials that you may have ready. Also, you can kind of run through the slides and get a general idea of what's going to be covered in class. And this also just helps kind of organize your physical space. So the third point there, avoid layering items on top of one another. What that means is try not to have your book and then your notes on top of your book and then maybe some notes somewhere else. A cluttered workspace isn't helpful for learning. So when possible, try to designate certain areas of your desk for different materials that you'll be using during lecture. Also, you want to always have a notepad out and take notes and reference slides when you can. So if an instructor is talking about slide 3 of the lecture, just writing that in your notes can help you place the material and refer back to that point in the lecture when you're reviewing notes later. We want to also treat the lectures as if they are live, even if you're in an asynchronous or recorded lecture. So try not to pause too much during class. Make sure that you have all the things you need so that you don't run the risk of pausing or stopping halfway through class. This just helps if you can listen to the whole lecture at once. It helps you start to form stronger memories around the items. Now, if you need to pause, that's fine too, but try to pause or take a break in lecture at the end of a concept, not just right in the middle of the explanation. And then an important tip is when you're in your learning space, and if you have housemates that are around, it's important just to let them know, hey, I'm going to be in class for an hour and a half, please don't bother me, or don't interrupt me. Or also, like, just leave me a note if you need something from me and I'll take a look at it, just to reduce the chances of distraction during class. Now, in terms of working with others in the class, this is also challenging because we're in a virtual space. It's harder to kind of bump into people and casually meet people. So we have to be a lot more intentional about making connections with our classmates. One way you can do this is start to create learning teams. So instead of calling them learning groups or study groups, I'm calling them learning teams in this instance, because your group or your team members are going to be so much more than study partners. You guys can really support one another by reminding each other of due dates, reviewing each other's work, and answering questions if you didn't get something from lecture. So you can really lean on your classmates a lot in the virtual environment, and they can be a really, really helpful resource for you all throughout the semester. What I would suggest is meeting with your team once a week just to check in, make sure that you guys are all on the same page, that everybody's up to speed, and even practice learning or practice testing one another with concepts. You can use Zoom, of course, or messaging, social media platforms, whatever you're comfortable with using to check in with one another, but it is important that you're having those touch points throughout the semester with your peers in your class. Also, I've seen a lot of students using Google Docs to share notes, and I think this is a great idea. Also, to create study guides or study tools, so that's an option for your learning team as well. And finally, when we're getting towards exam periods, you can kind of divide and conquer those study guides, split material up, teach it to one another, and then switch topics and switch roles. And that allows you to process information and hear about information from a lot of different sources. Now, in terms of your communicating with your learning team, we want to check in with them at least once a week outside of class. We also want to be communicating with our professors and any resources we're using on campus as well. So checking in with the professor, I like students to set the goal of checking in with them at least once a month, but hopefully more than that. And you can visit them in virtual office hours. You can ask for help for clarification, you can run an idea by them, and all kinds of things. They're there as a great resource, so definitely utilize them. Also, if you're having any type of problem, not only with course material, but life situations that may come up, maybe internet problems, maybe you have a housemate or a loved one that's sick and it's hard to focus, challenges with the assignments or keeping pace with the class, all of those things are important to communicate to the professor, not as complaints, but as, hey, this is going on in my life, I'm really struggling, can you help me, or is there any suggestion you have of how I can manage this better? In terms of people being sick in the household or you being sick, that's important just to kind of get some time to take care of yourself or your loved ones if that's necessary. So don't hold on to all the problems yourself, share them with your instructors, advisors, tutors, whoever you're interacting with for support. Communicating your needs to them is really, really important as we're in this virtual space. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about studying. So one thing that will help you a lot in terms of managing your course load virtually is to create study times. Creating a regular creating a regular study schedule from week to week helps make sure that you are getting familiar with the content, you're getting time with each class, and that you're staying on top of all your coursework. So we want to make sure that we're seeing content in some way every other day or so. So if you have a Tuesday, Thursday class, maybe studying Wednesday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or maybe Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So kind of like that off and on pattern helps in terms of retention and being able to store information in your memory system. And also you can let assignment due dates really drive your study schedule and help you prioritize. So if you have a paper coming up and then 2 weeks from now you have an exam, you're going to want to prioritize the paper, but also spend a little bit of time on the exam studying for that exam because you know that's coming up in a few more weeks. Now, when we're talking about studying and setting up those study schedules, we want to think in terms of 2-hour blocks of time or less. A lot of the research is showing that when we're using screens and online platforms, our focus time is not as great as if we're using books and paper because our eyes are filtering so much light and the pixels to manage that, it's slowing down our blinking time, which creates dry eyes, which then again affects our focus time. So we want to be aware of that. We want to work with that, and that means taking a lot of breaks and studying more often throughout the week. So rather than having a 4-hour study session, you're going to want to schedule either 4 1-hour sessions or 2 2-hour sessions throughout your week. Okay. And then another thing that's important is to study in these bursts, or to think about what themes am I going to cover in these study sessions and how much can I cover within the time that I have allotted. So that will help you focus yourself, study a lot on 1 or 2 specific concepts, then take a break, right? And then the next time you sit down, review those concepts again and add on some new material. So this helps in terms of moving information into your long-term memory system as well. Also, I want to point out, this is how we work as professionals in most fields. So honing that skill right now, you can think about, it's a challenge and we don't necessarily want to be in this environment learning necessarily, but it is a great opportunity for us to learn how to manage multiple things at once and how to work in short periods of time, shifting from topic to topic, because that's what the workspace really looks like anyways. Now, if you're struggling to stay focused, to engage with the content, which I'm hearing a lot of students are right now, we want to focus on being present again. I mentioned that at the start of the workshop, but again here, presence is really important as we're thinking about forming memories and learning material. So what we want to do is, if we designate our 2-hour study time slots throughout the week, we want to then go back and say, okay, what is my goal for each of these study sessions? Looking at the content I'm responsible for, what's my goal by the end of this session? Usually that's going to be, you can solve a problem, you can explain a concept in your own words, you can define a concept and provide an example, right? So think about application. But it's going to be production focused goals. So what are you going to be able to do by the end of the study session? We want to be very clear and concrete, and we want to write that goal down in our study space. So on a piece of paper, a whiteboard, whatever it is that you use to kind of take notes and plan your day. Then we look at that goal, we get started. The minute your mind starts to wander, you want to just kind of say, remind yourself, be here now and focus on that goal. What am I doing at the moment? Oh, okay, I'm looking at this content. I need to be able to do this. Let me try again. And refocus yourself, recenter yourself on the task at hand. This is a mindful approach, and this is used in a lot of life coaching, also in things like yoga or meditation. But it's a practice, so it's not going to work perfectly the first time. It's something you need to practice, and again, this skill is something you can use in a lot of aspects of your life. It's just helping gently remind your brain to refocus on the task at hand. As you practice, you'll get much better at this, and you'll be able to harness your focus as you move forward through the semester. Now, in terms of studying, we've talked about setting up our study sessions in 2-hour chunks, identifying study goals for each session. But this study flow is something important to think about as well. And this flow can work within one study session or over the week through many study sessions. So what we want to always do is start with a review. Start every study session with a review. What went on in lecture? What did I study last time? Kind of start to warm your brain up to receive information, and this is also helping our brain create connection between the material we're going to learn now and the old material that we learned maybe a day or two ago. So first we're starting with a review. Then we're going to try to use active learning strategies to learn new material. This means we are going to maybe read or look at our notes. Whatever you do to learn, you're going to do that, but oftentimes that is pretty passive in terms of activity wise. So if you're reading your book, that's great, but what we want to do is once you're finished reading, we want to do something with that material and be active and engaged with it. So are we going to be able to explain the concepts in our own words, draw a new diagram of the concept that was described, right? We're going to produce something and play around with the information to see if we've retained it, okay? Then the last, number 3 on this flow is going to be review. So you're going to essentially test your knowledge. Can you answer a few questions about the concepts? Can you explain it to somebody else in your own words? Can you create a chart or diagram that explains it well, but in a new and different way, right? So our study flow is really first reviewing content, getting kind of organized. Second, learning, but also engaging with the material, practicing production, seeing what we know versus what's familiar to us. And last is really testing our knowledge. Do we have it in our memory system? If you practice this flow, like I said, through your 2-hour study session or over the course of a week, you're going to find that information moves a lot more efficiently into your memory system. So I suggest you give it a go. This is always something, if you're practicing, you can schedule appointments with me later and we can talk about how this went for you. Now, when we're talking about being active and engaged with the material, we want to think about learning material or working with it in a lot of different ways. So when we talk about learning styles, we don't want to take the approach of, I'm a visual learner, I just need to look at pictures, that's all I need to do. No. We want to say, okay, I prefer visual learning methods. That means I need to create pictures and diagrams. Maybe I'll color code. Maybe I'll create a chart organizing this information, right? So again, when we're learning, when we're practicing, we are not just looking or reading or hearing. We are speaking, we're drawing, we're creating, we're doing something with the material. And the more we do different types of things with the material in a lot of different ways, the better we're processing that material and creating strong memories. And also we're able to recall information a lot faster. So this chart here on the screen really just walks you through different types of ways to process information, things to ask yourself as you're learning. And also I want to point out the yellow bubble, struggle and make mistakes. Making mistakes is a critical part of the learning process. And that's why in that second stage of the learning flow that I just covered, we want to practice with the material because we want to see where are our mistakes before we get to the test, right? We don't want to make mistakes for the first time on the exam. That's not helpful. We're not learning in that way. What we want to do is make those mistakes in our study sessions so we can go and ask for help. We can loop back and use that communication that I talked about earlier to get clarification and move forward with our learning. Okay, now the last little bit of our workshops focused on online exams. So some strategies, some tricks is when possible, you want to be practicing in online spaces if you're going to have online exams. Again, this is just because it's a different skill that you're using and you're using your brain and recall in a different way when you're looking at a screen versus looking at a piece of paper. So when possible, use things like Quizlets or sample tests in the textbook. If you have an online textbook, sometimes they have questions at the end. You want to practice that online if you can. At least practice reading through questions online so you can get a feel for how that is in the online space. Also, we want to make sure that you're keeping really well-organized notes. I recommend that the notes that you take, you put key terms at the top, almost like a table of contents for your notes. So if you're writing paper notes, right up at the top margin, put the key terms that are covered for that page right in the margin. This helps you as you prepare for the exam because you can flip through and see very quickly where information is in your notes. And that just, again, helps you with speed of recall and being able to process information at a faster rate. It will also help you make connections because you'll be able to see exactly where those key terms are throughout that section of notes. During the exam, we want to focus on managing exam time. So if you can take a few minutes at the top of the test or the beginning of the test to figure out your time to question ratio. What this means is basically if you have 60 questions and you have an hour, you know as a test taker you have a minute per question. That's important to be able to understand. You want to practice that ratio outside of the test if you can, but especially on the exam, you want to know you don't want to burn more than 1 minute per question. You want to move on so you can gather positive points throughout the exam. If you stay and get stuck on a question and you just ruminate on it and you don't leave that question, you're losing minutes for other questions down the road. So what I recommend is if you have a minute per question, you commit to yourself at 30 seconds. If you're not understanding or able to recall that item, you move on. That allows you to save time at the end to go back to those questions that are left open, and it helps you just process information faster as you move through the exam. Hopefully you're able to click through the exam and go back to old questions. If you're not, then what I would recommend is you read the question out loud, because you can, you're at home. Read it out loud, make your best guess, and move on. But don't sit there and keep trying and trying because you're losing time and essentially points towards the end of the exam. We also want to plan for technical issues. So we want to talk with our professors during your first exam review. Hopefully they'll do that with you, is what do you want us to do if the screen times out, if I lose power, if my internet stops, right? Just go through those questions with your instructor, ask them what they want you to do. What I would recommend is you always want to take a screenshot if possible and email that to your professor. So one thing you'll want to do is have your professor's contact information written down on a piece of paper or in your phone, maybe as a picture, before you take the test. Because if you lose internet, you're also losing your syllabi, and you can't contact your professor that way. But if you have it as a picture on your phone, then at least you can pull that up. Hopefully your phone's working and you can give them an email, and that way at least you can troubleshoot a little bit. And then once you notify the instructor, you want to just wait and see what they have to say. All right, a lot of information, a lot of different aspects of online learning and online exams. Hopefully you found some of these tips helpful. If you would like to schedule free appointments with me or another academic coach to talk through some more of the online strategies specific to your course load, you can schedule appointments for free with us through Beach Connect. You can Google academic coaching at the Learning Center at CSULB for more information. There are also a lot of other short video tutorials, a lot of resources that you can check out on our webpage. So go ahead on over there and see what you can find that might help, and definitely schedule appointments if you feel like you want some more support that's really tailored to your individual needs. Thank you.